people aren't not profitable just simply because they don't, have the right financial information. They have mindsets around their service offering, mindsets around pricing, mindsets around labor models, mindsets around expense models, all of which have to be transformed in order to get from where they are to where they want to go.
I don't throw darts at a board. I bet on sure things. Read Sun Tzu, The Art of War. Every battle is won before it's ever fought. Think about it.
Welcome to another episode of the Profitable Property Management Podcast. Today, I have my brother from another mother and Daniel Craig. Good to have you in the house, man. How you doing?
Seems like I should just be on this podcast. I don't know how to say that, but man, it's good to be on with you.
Yeah, it was meant to be, man. Well, here we are, and I'm really excited to catch up on a bunch of different stuff, but I just want to dive right in because I have kind of an agenda here. You and I know each other really well.
Yeah.
And I'm reflecting back on what our relationship was early on. We founded Profit Coach, and the first thing that we did, like most businesses, early on, you're kind of playing house. The business isn't real. There's no brick building. There's no big team of staff.
You have a booth background.
You have a booth background, and you have as fast as you can talk on the phone.
And a credit card machine.
And that's what it felt like with me and you. I remember being on coaching calls early on where it felt like, man, can we tap dance enough to get through this call and really land the plane? And here we are all this time later, hundreds of coaching calls down the path, man. I just wanted to
I did a rough calculation yesterday. I think it's been about 500 hours of coaching.
500 hours of coaching. Beautiful. And that's on top of, work in the weeds, behind the scenes, in people's books. Yeah. So I'd love to go back and just kind of reflect on what sticks out for you as some key learnings having gone through that coaching journey and what you've seen with clients now that really have truly progressed. Yeah. This is no longer about from, okay advice to really good advice. We've seen material changes over multiple years.
It's honestly incredible.
Of clients having this climb. What sticks out for you, man, in your reflections?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things for me, and I think this speaks to the journey of the client as well, was when we started the coaching program, we thought we could throw up a dashboard at them, give them, here's your current reality, here's your benchmark, go. And what we realized was there's a huge gap between understanding where you are and where you need to go, and all of the mindset shifts that have to happen between those 2 points for change to occur. People aren't not profitable just simply because they don't, have the right financial information. They have mindsets around their service offering, mindsets around pricing, mindsets around labor models, mindsets around expense models, all of which have to be transformed in order to get from where they are to where they want to go. So what that meant for us and for me as a coach was I realized that when I show up to a coaching call, it's about much more than just showing people current reality and making financial projections. It's about helping them think through what are the mindsets that are blocking them from getting to where they want to go. So I think that was the personal transformation that had to occur, and that's also the transformation that has to occur for our clients.
I think about doctors a lot, Danny. I think about you go to the doctor. What are you paying for? Are you paying for the prescription? Prescription's $40, $50. It's the diagnosis.
Yeah.
The ability to suss out, to take a confused person and suss out what's really going on. That feels like, to me, the skill that you're alluding to.
Yeah,
there.
and not just the financial diagnosis. You're at 5% profitability because your labor efficiency is at 2.1 and your CAC is through the roof. It's what are the mindsets behind
the thought patterns.
The thought patterns behind your pricing model, behind your marketing and growth model that are driving those results. And that's another level altogether. Been a significant journey for me, but I think also for our clients. I think of a conversation I had recently with Mike Taylor at Red Door Rents in Indianapolis. And he's been in the coaching program for coming up on 2 years now, and doing a lot of great things, but struggling with growth. And part of that struggle, here's a mindset, is am I a property manager or am I a sales and marketing guru that happens to do property manager? How do you think of yourself? It's an identity question. And so after being a part of the mastermind group for a number of months, after being part of the focus calls, hearing the stories, he got on a coaching call just a few months ago and he said, I got it. I've got the sales and marketing vision now. And I know what I'm going to do. I know how I'm going to go about this. I'm bought in, not just to the strategies, but to the idea of embracing the personal transformation to become a sales and marketing expert. So that's one example of the kind of mindset transformation that occurs.
Yeah. And, mindset is one of those squishy things that in many, even for myself, I can be allergic at times to the idea that it's just as simple. Am I just going to think my way out of this problem?
Sure.
You're telling me I can just start thinking different thoughts and it will resolve itself? And it's yes and no at the same time.
Sure.
There's a lot of nuance in that. But when I think about some of the mindsets that have opened up or closed things down for me, and I think about identifying the mindset behind it, back to diagnosis.
Yeah.
How do you navigate through that conversation to help somebody uncover and get to the point where they're in a position to have that aha?
I was just thinking about this yesterday a little bit in more detail. And for, ever since we've been going, really since my first presentation at PM Grow, we've talked about 3 steps to 3x profits. And they're number 1, get clear. Number 2, define the target. Number 3, stay on track. But there's some additional color there that came to me yesterday as I was thinking about this. And sort of the driver of clarity is honesty. And that is painful. And so when you talk about diagnosis, it's being willing to eat a little humble pie and tell yourself things like, I have the team I deserve. Leaders get the teams they deserve. I'll never forget the first coaching call. You and I both know what I'm about to say, where we get on the coaching call with this particular client. This isn't our very first coaching call, but first call with this client. And we're talking about his issues in the business and his horrible labor efficiency. And his answer to that dilemma was, people are blankety blank. Well, there's a lack of honesty. There's the blame game.
Not a lot of self-reflection.
Not a lot of self-reflection there. But over the course of that engagement, that the situation, but there's been a complete transformation. So to your point on diagnosis, number 1, get clear. But the driver of clarity is honesty and humility to be able to say, all right, I do have mindset issues potentially that are driving this business. Here's an issue. Maybe you lack focus as an entrepreneur. And the reason that you are not profitable is because you're trying to do 5 different things and you're doing none of them well. So I would say clarity and humility and honesty to get clear and just to be willing to embrace the realities of the business. And part of that looks like not making excuses. Here's another example. You've got significant churn issues, Mr. Property Manager. It's the market. How many times have you heard that at an
If you were in my market,
if you were in my market, it's a hot sales market. Well, it is. What are you doing about it? Are you slowing down the heat? Are you having the recurring conversations with your clients to say, you know what, it's a hot sales market, but we're not at the top, or whatever your opinion is on the matter? So it's honesty, it's ownership, it's humility, and to basically to admit, you know what, these are the realities of my business, and I more or less deserve them. I created them. So that's number 1. Number 2 would be defining the target. This also takes a dose of humility, but I would say the essence of this idea here is define the target, and specifically around that, what we want our clients to do is really understand their why. Why are you in business? Are you in business to show up at an ARPM conference and tell people how many doors you manage? I think there's such power and freedom to be had from understanding, what, it isn't about the doors. It's about my why. And, your why could come down to a variety of areas. For a lot of us,
what are some examples from clients?
It's entrepreneurial freedom. It's freedom of time. Okay. Well, do you need 1,000 doors to have freedom of time? No. Freedom of money. Do you need 1,000 doors to have freedom of money? Actually not.
I'll never forget the call, and the one I'm referring to, where the operator comes in and says, I want to grow my business by 3 times.
Yeah.
I want to triple the size of my business.
Yeah.
So I can triple my profits.
Right.
And the operating profits at that time were around like 3%.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking, that is the worst idea I've ever heard.
Yeah.
To triple the size of your business.
And through that conversation, in this case, we had to give some hard news, like you don't have the capabilities for 3x.
It's delusional.
It's delusional. And by the way, you don't need 3x to achieve your goals. Fast forward, I was actually thinking of this story when I was talking about knowing your why. This particular client realized that what she was in this business for was a retirement program. And so today, she has gotten clear on the things she's good at, which are optimizing labor efficiency, optimizing revenue. She's okay at growth. She's really good at real estate sales, so she does a fair bit of this on the side. But she's been able to create a great customer experience that generates enough referrals to maintain modest growth in the business. Today, she's at about 200 units, and she's making more money than many of the clients that I know in significantly higher door brackets. To be specific, she's, after taking a market-based salary for her part-time work in the company, she's making over $200,000 a year in profit on 200 doors. What happened there? She got clear on her why, which is, I want a retirement program that can generate some passive income for me. It doesn't need to be $500,000. Specifically, we set a target of $150,000. She didn't need 1,000 doors to do that. She didn't need 600 doors to do that. What she needed was modest growth and a stable work situation with her team. And so she's been able to bring 2 high-quality people to the team, backed up with remote team members to drive a really solid self-managing team with a great labor efficiency. And she's now in the process of working with the attorneys to do a 49% sellout to one of her key team members, who now is going to be bought in to maintain this business and basically run this client's retirement plan, or at least a part of this client's retirement plan. The point is, she got clear on her why. So number one, you got to get clear on your current reality. Number two, define the target, and that really requires getting clear on your why. It could be, like we said, entrepreneurial freedom of some kind. It could be, here's another one. What is your why? It could be some degree of understanding your personal gifts or areas where you want to grow, leveraging those God-given talents, and actually developing new skill sets as a human being. That could be a why. So for some of our clients, that looks like it's not about a particular door target. It's about mastering business. It's about mastering sales and marketing. It's about using business as an opportunity for personal growth. That's great. Here's another why. This one just sort of has bombshelled me this year, and that is one reason to build a business, one reason to grow a significantly larger business is because you're building an investment vehicle. And you're building a mechanism in which you can put cash in and get significant return on investment. Now, if you have a 100-unit property management company, that company is of a certain size. It can only handle so much cash.
And there's diminishing returns.
Yeah, the diminishing returns. So why grow? Why does the size of your company matter? Well, it doesn't just matter because of bottom line proceeds, but it actually, the size of your investment vehicle, the size of your company actually determines how much cash you can feed into the business and how much returns you can get out. So that's another conversation. We might get there. But the point is, those are some examples of whys. So number one, define the target. Or number one, get clear, be humble, be honest. Number two, define the target, know your why. And I'll just say one other thing. Focus has been such a theme for our successful clients. The clients who aren't successful are just, squirrel. One day this, another day that. It's another location. It's a hub and spoke model. It's another division. And I'm good with all of that. But let me ask you, is your mothership doing well today? Maybe you should get that set straight before you move on to the next thing.
Blocking and tackling is not sexy, but it's necessary. You and I experience the same weird dichotomy that defines coaching and human performance in general, which is the people that ostensibly need it the least are the most invested. They show up, they spend the money, butt in chair, they're paying attention. And the folks that need the help the least, a little more flaky. Not always at the meeting, not always paying attention. It's a weird,
and it's and concomitant with that is another level of expectation. Like you know, the first category of clients, they're like, give me one nugget and I'll run with it. And the other category is like, solve all my business problems.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, give me a half a nugget cryptically. I'll decrypt it and I will apply it.
Right.
You're absolutely right. And I think there's a lesson in that for us as we've grown as entrepreneurs and operators, and having self-respect, respecting your own vision, just I'll say it bluntly, not prostituting yourself for the sake of something that you feel like that you have to have.
Yeah.
There really is leverage in calling your own shots. When I think about this transition around honesty, what comes to mind for me is the operator whose expectations for growth, for crazy growth, 10x growth, come at the expense of what could have been possible and probable. Meaning I could have got a 50% return, a 60% return, but instead I got a negative 10% return because I was chasing a 300% return.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on what you see in terms of managing ambition while not sacrificing what's actually possible and within the scope of your means and your capabilities? I think you know the conversation I'm alluding to here. Growth would be the classic area where there is so much money wasted in the pursuit of growth that could have, if it had just not been spent, could have been pocketed as profit in many cases.
Well, I hate to sound like a broken record, but I really do think it comes down to understanding your why. What is your purpose? If your purpose as a human being is to run a 10,000 unit management company, and anything shy of that is going to,
then God bless,
leave you in the dumps of despair, then you should probably go chase that. Now, you might want to just think about that one for a day or two before you commit. But the point is, it's going to be brutal. It's going to be absolutely brutal. And you should probably, be ready for that challenge. And the size of your why really needs to drive your level of commitment to that why, or maybe it's the other way around. But the point is, if you're going after a big dream, you better have a really big commitment to that why. So in terms of a smaller goal, I think it's really a matter of understanding what are the various priorities in my life. That's personally how I think about it. Is, what can I do well in this area of my life and also do well in other areas of my life? Because it's not business success at the expense of everything. It's at the expense of my relationship with my wife, my kids, my church community. So you got to take your life as a holistic whole. Now, is it possible to achieve things that you didn't dream of in ways that you didn't think was possible? Yeah, it is. But you better get, and this sort of leads me to my third point, you better get a team around you that's going to really help this vision go beyond you. And so I think it comes to a point of leverage. If you're going to go for a big why, if you're going to go for something stretching, are you really working from a position of leveraging the right people on the team who are going to carry that vision, even if you're not there?
What's visceral to me around the people front, Danny, is so many times going through this experience myself and seeing it for others, where you can conceptually tell me that I could delegate and it would be great and I would get a good outcome, and how different that is than watching the before and after of either in myself or in an operator, seeing them have the experience of just working with that next level of talent.
Yeah.
Every time you get to that next level of talent, afterwards, it's like, duh. Obviously, you take it for granted. And yet for the next level of talent, it's like, well, I don't know if it's possible. I'm not sure if I should spend the money. Can I really delegate that, et cetera?
Right.
You feel me on that?
100%. And to that point, start small. If you really want to understand leverage in business, start by creating personal margin for change. I would say this is another significant area of learning for me is the people that hit benchmark profitability create margin for change. They're not chasing owner tickets and tenant tickets. They've created margin for change. What's one of the best ways you can do that? Hire a rock star executive assistant to take that stuff off your plate and create that personal margin.
Which you've done. Her name is Sadie. She's amazing. We love you, Sadie.
Yeah. So, and then that experience begins to multiply itself. I mean, that happened for me. I hired this admin, she's no longer my executive assistant, which is sort of,
she's graduated.
Graduated, which is sort of the bummer. But she's now taken our hiring and HR process. And earlier this year, we had the opportunity to hire another coach on the team, and that's been transformational. And our chief development officer, Tim Peters, that's been transformational. But one of the learnings. And you gotta be judicious about this, and especially if any of my clients are listening, you gotta run the numbers, you gotta run the forecast. But the saying that says top A player talent pays for itself has shown itself to be true multiple times.
Amen.
So to your point, how big is big enough? How do you think about a big gain versus a medium gain? I think it's really measured upon your commitment to personal change. If you're going to go for a 10x result, that's going to require a much higher degree of personal change than 2x. 2x, you can pedal a little harder, use a few tips and tricks from NARPM. And NARPM brings a lot of value to the table.
Amen. So,
but you can get 2x. But what about 10x? That's a different personal growth journey. That's a different level of focus. And, to be honest, every day we have to look ourselves in the mirror as entrepreneurs and say, am I habits and practices and thinking and mindsets really reflective of a 10x entrepreneur? Or let's face it, am I a 2x entrepreneur? You know what? And if you're a 2x entrepreneur, good for you. That's great. Whatever else you want to do in life, go do it. And don't put yourself under the burden of a 10x result.
Well, so the 10x entrepreneur reference, that is a reference from a Dan Sullivan Concepts and Thinking. I remember watching that video, sending it to you, watching it myself, watching it with you multiple times.
You're like, here's some Kool-Aid, drink it fast.
Danny, yeah, that is kind of me. I do that frequently in my life. But I love that video. I think you told me it's no longer online.
I found it again, so it's good.
It's basically a video
just watched it this week
of an entrepreneur articulating his shift in mindset from going, I'm winning when I'm making a lot of money and doing big things, to instead saying, I'm winning when I'm doing less. I'm doing as little as possible, delegating as much as possible. The 10x mindset that he articulates is fairly drastic and extreme, if for no other reason than it requires you to actually get clear on what it's going to look like to get out of the way of the business and to stop having that dependence upon yourself. And that goes back to identity.
Yeah.
If I'm needed, I'm the man.
Right.
If the organization needs me, when something bad happens, they're calling me. There's a certain sense of duty and significance and helping people, which ostensibly is noble. But boy, in my experience, that also is just incredibly limiting. And it's an enablement function to continue to choose to work with people that are never capable of rising above the level that you need them to actually have the autonomy that you want.
So it's so interesting that you bring this up. I had a little bit of a personal crisis around this last week. We have about 24 people on the team right now. Every 6 months, we bring all the team in person for a retreat. And in the past, I'm like the guy, I facilitate the collaboration, I cast the vision, I'm the guy. Well, we now have a very competent set of managers. And ahead of this last retreat that we had last week, we basically said, all right, you guys are going to run the collaboration. And they did. It was amazing. And it felt fantastic until we got to the very last session and everybody shares their wins for the week. And one of the wins that we had people share was, what unique ability did you notice on another team member? So it was really trying to, get the team to understand the skill sets that are on the team and learn how to leverage those skill sets. It was great, but I almost didn't get mentioned. I got one mention at the end by my assistant, who I think was trying to save face for me, because I just didn't get mentioned at all.
Wow.
And I walked away from that feeling a little bit like that stung a little bit.
What a reflection.
But then I was like, wait, that's good.
This is the point. This is how it's supposed to work.
This is how it's supposed to work.
I think it was Sun Tzu that said something effective, that great leadership in a great leadership scenario, people walk away and they say, we did it ourselves.
Yeah.
But not for Daniel, not for Jordan. We couldn't have done it. They say, no, we did it ourselves. Yeah, it's a force multiplier, man. Well, here's what I'd love to pivot into. There's a lot of conversation around M&A, acquisition, disruption. It's interesting.
Which I've been hearing ever since I've been in this industry, by the way. So.
Undoubtedly. and I'm sure if we were in another industry, we'd be hearing it there as well. But you and I have a somewhat unique position in the sense that we participate with clients that are evaluating, and we participate at a pretty high level of fidelity.
Yeah.
And you even more so. You're more in depth in those conversations than I am. Sometimes I have a more shallow depth of conversation that's like, generally speaking, here are the considerations. On the left hand, we have this. On the right hand, we have that. A lot of the conversations that you're having are much higher fidelity. Like, here's the spreadsheet, here's your margin, here's the multiple. If you take the money, here's what you would have to do with it to be able to get a competitive return as opposed to what you're doing with it. What are you seeing and how are you thinking about these conversations based on the conversations you're having with folks that are fielding acquisition offers? And then we can go to the flip side.
So people who are considering selling.
Correct.
Yeah. So this is an interesting conversation because I've been working with people for 4 years in this industry, and it's interesting to see what they've accomplished and interesting to see them work through the dilemma of to sell or not to sell. So I was reflecting on this a little bit, and I would say here's a list of some practical considerations around things to think about if you're considering selling. Number one would be only sell when you don't have to. What do I mean by that? If you have to sell because you're in a position of burnout and
you're under duress,
you just can't do it anymore, that's fine. Okay. But you're going to get a big discount. Mm-hmm. Okay. So this is sort of like if you're wanting to sell from a position of strength and get the maximum return on investment in what you put into your business. Number one, only sell when you don't have to. Because when you have to, not only does it drive the negotiation the wrong direction, because your business probably isn't healthy, to be honest, if you feel like you have to sell. But number two, you're not in a good mindset for negotiating. You're negotiating from a position of desperation, and that's a horrible place to negotiate from.
I'm so conflicted about this one, Danny, because I feel like, and this is something I've told people, is that the best reason to sell is if you don't want to do this any longer. If you're retiring, you have cancer, that is a non-financial reason. And given that the financial reasons generally don't favor selling a profitable business, it's actually one of the better reasons. If you're not in that situation, it's a much murkier financial position. So how would you kind of reconcile that thought?
Yeah. Well, that sort of gets to my second point is only sell once you've achieved your why. Okay. So, if you've run the course of this business and you're at a point where you're like, you know what, I've got other whys in other areas of my life that sort of are, more important, higher priority than what I was pursuing in this business. So maybe it's not necessarily achieving it, but don't compromise your why unless you have a greater why that's taking precedence over that. The point I was trying to make with the first item is only sell when you don't have to. Is I'm speaking from a position of financial integrity and whether or not you're getting maximum return on your investment. So that's the point there. But surely, if you're in a position where you're burnt out and you're hurting your family and whatever, you're hurting your health, and there's just not a way out. Then okay, consider it. But I'd have to ask a question, which is, why did you get into business in the first place? And I think that's really worth some reflection. Because at the end of the day, you had a vision. And my question for you, if you're about ready to pull the trigger and sell the business in the midst of burnout and exhaustion, have you lost the vision? Do you need to re-clarify what that vision is? Do you need to get some juice again on the freedom of time, the freedom of finance, the freedom of purpose, the freedom of relationship? That was the whole reason that you went into business in the first place. And to be honest, Jordan, I think you and I and all of us as entrepreneurs have to have this conversation every week, if not every day. Why am I in business? In those tough days, you have to get clear on that why. So, you know, I guess I just sort of hesitate to say that selling in a state of burnout without a conscientious, clear decision that says,
Well said.
I have recognized that this business has served its purpose and run its course, and I'm making a very calculated, values-based decision around this sell. Anything outside of that, I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm on board with that.
Well said, man. Yeah, I totally received that. I think that's some really good pushback. And I think the question to ask is it the business that's the problem, or is it a set of problems that will follow you after the business is gone?
100%.
It's kind of like in relationships, right? Is it the other person, or is it me and the way I'm relating to the thing? And I think that you make a good point that oftentimes what burnout represents is a set of emotional relationships with a set of problems that are solvable. And clearly, for the person that they're clearly solvable because somebody else is taking over the business.
Sure.
And what are they planning? Are they planning on taking over your dysfunction?
Yeah.
No, they're planning on fixing it and making it better.
Right.
What about the way they're relating to it is the specific thing that needs to get shifted to make it something that you would actually want to run? Because we have clients that have a great life and they're not killing themselves.
Right. So I'm going to foray into an area that may be more or less risky, but you can edit this out of the podcast show if you want.
Hit it.
I'm in my 30s, so perhaps my perspective is somewhat suspect. But I have to ask you, are you letting an identity around age drive your decision to sell?
Interesting.
Because we live in an age in which a retirement philosophy says you should be able to retire somewhere in your 60s. And a lot of times what goes with that is a mindset that says, I can stop changing and innovating and growing as a human being in my 60s. And so what you may be up against is a clash of mindsets. Are you on a path of lifetime growth in which you're going to keep producing and you're going to keep changing and you're going to keep growing and you're going to keep learning as a human being? And that's one path. Or are you at a point where you're looking at everybody in their 60s that you're your friends and they're like, I'm done. And I'm not really saying one is right or the other. I think I have a preference to the former. But I know clients that are in their 70s and they're crushing it. Why? Because they've embraced the opportunity to continue to grow and to continue to change.
Bryn here from Lead Simple. I love Lead Simple, but that feels like a given. Instead of telling you why I love it, here's Sarah Hatch from Hatch Property Management.
We're very happy, and I recommend so many people to Lead Simple because I'm like, oh my gosh, it changed our world. It totally changed our whole way of managing properties and staying in contact. It's the best business investment I've ever made.
To learn more and connect with one of my teammates, go to leadsimple.com/podcast today.
I can think of some people that come to mind here. This is a random name, but Lyle Haas is a name that comes to mind of somebody that's just continually wanting to stay on the edge. That edge of learning is something that's been so stimulating to me in my career. I've experienced part of that with you. My background is first in lead gen and then in software and then getting into finance and accounting with you. It was one of those new learning curves. And I remember one specific conversation being told something along the lines of, well, you guys don't know how to do that. Thinking, I'm so glad you said that. Just wait, give me 18 months, give me 12 months. You and I have had a number of learning curves.
I think the example was trust accounting.
Specifically, yeah, exactly. Which now in retrospect is hilarious. But I think about that with the NARPM accounting standard. That was the original thing that we cut our teeth on, which is a huge learning curve, several thousand hours of effort. And that's been in the wild now. I mean, now we're at the point where there's reflections and conversations about going back, updating that, etc. But enough time has passed to get clear on the validity and the utility of that idea. What are you seeing out in the wild with client adoption and the difference in the impact that it's making? Because the NARPM accounting standard conversions that Profit Coach does outstrips coaching probably by a factor of 3 or 4, right?
Yeah, that's about
At this point, 100 plus conversions,
Yeah.
fair to say.
Yep.
What are you seeing? What are your reflections there?
Good question. Well, I think one of the big reflections is that there is a lot of surprise in many cases when people see their numbers post-conversion. There's just a high degree of like, I don't entirely know what to expect. We just had a client recently who was so concerned about making sure that they looked good on the results of our diagnosis that they were trying to talk our conversion team into moving operating expenses below the line, which of course we did not do. So, there's a lot of like, what are my numbers? And which just speaks to people don't know. And that's not true across the board, but there's a healthy segment of that. But I will tell you the comment that I probably get more than that is, when I show people the numbers, I ask them, what did you expect? And they're like, yeah, this is about what I expected. But that they are just gut feeling it, right?
Sure.
And so I would say, back to where we started, the reality is that the NARPM accounting standards bring a significant amount of clarity that people just wouldn't otherwise have.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't even necessarily know the numbers that should be measured. And so we give that to them, and we give them a view of financial management that I think is new for a lot of people, because a lot of us are making our journey from practitioners to entrepreneurs in the middle of running a business.
Absolutely.
From being a property manager to being a property management entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
And so to answer your question, what am I seeing out in the wild? I think we're giving people a financial model that they just didn't have before, and a financial rubric. We're also giving people a clear sense of priority through this mechanism. What is the most important thing you could do to change your business today?
What's the lever if you put your hand on it and you pull it back?
Right. Yeah, but for those listening, ask yourself that question. What's the most important thing you need to do to move your business forward today?
Mm-hmm.
Are you operating with that kind of clarity? Now, to be honest, it's one thing to have that clarity at a high level, and then you have all these tactics down below. And certainly it takes time to prioritize and understand the focus that you need to be pursuing. But at the end of the day, the numbers give you that priority to a large extent. And so I think, to answer your question, we're seeing a lot of focus around what are the biggest drivers that need to occur, or the biggest changes that need to occur in my business to drive profitability. I'll give you a big one. When we do an analysis for our clients, very commonly, I would say in the majority of cases, the number one thing people can do to transform their business is retool their pricing. Did they know that before then? They probably had a sense of that. They probably heard about a random set of fees at a property management event that they could start charging, but they lacked the conviction around that.
The contextualization.
The contextualization and the conviction that says, if I do these 5 fees,
here's my upside.
Here's my upside. And so, when I have conversations with people at the conversion process where we're looking through their numbers and we're talking about the opportunities, I tell them about 5 or 6 or 7 fees that aren't in their business, perhaps most of that they're not currently charging, perhaps most of which they've already heard about, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what I come to them with is, this is why you're only at 5% profitability. It's because you have a gap in your revenue per unit. And if you implement these fees and get your revenue per unit to benchmark targets, then you're going to not only get to 25% profitability, but you're going to add another $100,000 of profit to the bottom line every year. Now that's clarity. That's motivation to take action. So what are we seeing in terms of the impact? It's clarity on current reality, and it's clarity on priorities to make the transition in their business that they want to make.
Well, let's talk about the labor side, just the cost structure in general. That's a part of this. What are you seeing in terms of clarity on that side, in terms of the references and the context that people are able to gain about where they're at now and where they could be? What are the cost categories that are most commonly dramatically out of whack when things are out of whack on the expense side of things?
Sure. Yeah. We really look at three dimensions of your cost structure. It would be labor, growth, and just general overhead. All three of those can be easily out of whack. And I've seen scenarios in which any one or all three of them are significantly out of whack. In terms of priority, the easiest place to start is just meals and entertainment, Disneyland, and nanny, right? And some of you are thinking, well, wait, no, I run that stuff through my business for
Tax efficiency.
And okay, but I have to ask you, what is the cost of that financial fog? That may be a strategic thing to do, but have you measured the cost of not having a true financial clarity? And here's the thing. Do you really want to be spending all of that money like that? Like, I'm working with a business right now, and they could say that the fact that they've spent $88,000 in travel in the last 3 months is just a reflection of, well, we run stuff through the business. You don't have a budget.
It's a lack of discipline.
It's a lack of discipline. You don't have targets. And, what are you telling your team? I mean, maybe your team doesn't have a credit card, but what kind of habits are you portraying to your team around cost efficiency by the way you spend money on the business? So I would say the easiest place to start is just cut the fluff and run a tight ship. Understand that your facilities and other operating expenses, need to be in a certain benchmark range, which is, 18% of revenue combined. And, if you have a hard time with that, then set some budgets. Here's what we can afford to spend on meals and entertainment. Because at the end of the day, the problem with just saying I'm running this stuff through my business is it throws fog and a lack of clarity into your pursuit of a goal. What is your goal? Are you committed to hitting 25% profitability because you think you can? Well, then do it and get there and do what you need to do in the business model to hit that target. If you're just saying, well, I don't hit 25% profitability because I run all this stuff through my business, that is so lame sauce and sort of debilitating to your courage to make the necessary changes in your business that you need to make to achieve your goals.
Yeah, it's a really negative cycle. You're not getting the upside of getting the reward of that kind of dopamine pleasure hit of getting the profits that encourages more profits, et cetera. When I think about the lack of financial clarity, and you made a comment about a half hour ago about another client pulling $200K out of the business off of around 200 doors. It's just so important to emphasize that is after a market-based salary.
Sure.
So that is true, pure, actual, proper cream.
Yeah. Now, to be honest, she's only working half-time. So she's taking a half-time salary,
Right.
which is fair.
It's pro rata on a half-time basis. I think about another client who has a recurring business expense that is, borderline useless in our mutual estimation and experience. And how in that, I'm thinking about a conversation you had with that individual where the logic and the rationale was, I know I have this expense, it's an investment, and obviously we just don't happen to agree with that specific investment. But the very sloppy overall story and narrative was like, well, the business isn't profitable because I'm making this investment.
Right.
The reality was what you did was back out the investment.
I said,
so
okay, well,
it still isn't working.
Let's look at the profitability without the investment.
It still is, but which they could have done. But it's this holistic experience of like, once you give yourself permission to not be running a tight ship, it really bleeds over into all aspects of your thinking about the business.
100%. Yeah. And I don't want to be overly dogmatic. Are there ways to parse these things out? Yes. But you need to have a clean, clear financial model that in which you can achieve success.
Yeah. So the upside, this journey, this story arc, which is the most rewarding aspect of it to me. It's easy to dunk on folks that are doing it wrong. Boy, do we want to pay homage to the folks that are doing it right. And to see that trajectory, we reorganized the mastermind groups within Profit Coach to be organized based on net operating income, which had a dramatic impact.
In just property management.
In just property management, exactly. And it really catered to the entrepreneurial mindset, that competitive nature, and seeing folks progress up that ladder is incredibly rewarding. what for you are some reflections you have in seeing folks kind of hit some of those big picture goals? You mentioned the one client that we previously referenced, without using names. Any other reflections on the reward or the experience for you of seeing folks kind of progress along that journey and hit their long-term goals?
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of a weird thrill, but it's one that I enjoy, and that is getting on to a client call, looking at their dashboard and seeing a profitability chart that's going from 0 to 25%.
Or a negative number to a positive number.
A negative number to a positive number, exactly. But obviously, it's fun to look at that chart and to see the progress that they've made. But I think it's a lot more fun to consider what that progress means to them personally. And everybody has a variety of things that they do in life, and then that freedom of time and finances expresses itself in different ways for people. But I think the thing that has been rewarding is to see that a lot of our clients are still in the game even after they hit the benchmarks, and they don't stop learning.
They're still going.
They're still going. And I would say to you, make sure that as you think about your business, that you have a why that that's big enough, right? Because there is this reality for certain people where they hit a goal and they hit a certain level of success and they're just lost in life. So you got to make sure, that doesn't happen, that your why is big enough. But I think of clients who have mastered one aspect of business, and this is the approach to adversity that I appreciate, which is master one, and move on to the next. And so they're doing really well in property management, and now they're moving on to building their own build to rent portfolios. So significant adjacent opportunities. But even still, they're not losing focus on continuing to tweak and retool their own business. I had an interesting conversation with a client the other day who I thought was sort of at the top of the game when it came to sales and marketing. And upon further reflection with this client, he was identifying significant gaps in their sales and marketing structure that he was, working on solving. And so even those who are successful, you have to ask yourself, is there still opportunity in our business to retool things, to tweak things, to develop a new level of mastery in the organization? And man, business and the changing world in which we live just, I think, continues to provide those opportunities. So it's neat to see clients continue to embrace that journey of growth, doing new things in new industries or adjacencies, but also staying in the game and finding new ways to add value, create value in their existing organizations.
Well, we're an odd breed as entrepreneurs, constantly hitting new goals and benchmarks and still unsatisfied and looking for the new thing, something to maintain an edge. I'm curious, as you reflect back on your own journey as an entrepreneur, what has it meant to you personally? You and I have been in the trenches. I've seen a ton of growth in myself, and I know you've experienced that in yourself as well. So the business lessons learned are interesting and useful. But when you think about how it's holistically impacted you as a human, what has it meant for you in the totality of your life beyond just making a buck?
Sure. Well, when I got started with this business, I sort of had a meaning 1.0 that I think about. And that was, I want to do cool things in life. I want to have some free cash flow to fund those cool things. And I think a business can get me that. And that's great. And I think that's where a lot of us start. We read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and that's where we start. And so that was sort of meaning 1.0. Only trouble was that meaning 1.0 did not occur in the time frame or in the manner in which it was supposed to occur. And so while I still believe in meaning 1.0, and that is, freedom of time and money, I've graduated, I did graduate to meaning 2.0, which was, even if I don't achieve those things in quite the time and manner in which I thought, boy, am I going through a massive personal transformation. And that is really, really rewarding. And so, it's a transformation of habits, of thinking, of faith, just change of bad habits of organization and delegation and whatever it is. And so that has been rewarding. But what I've realized is that the most rewarding thing, or at least meaning 3.0 for me, is now seeing and facilitating that change in other people. And we just came off, like I said, our week-long retreat. And I got to see that in full color, where we have a team of managers that are stepping up. We hired them at entry-level accountants, and now they're managing the company, leading the team conversations. And here was the coolest thing. As entrepreneurs, we drink this Kool-Aid, and we walk around with the Kool-Aid mustaches, and we hope that the people on our team sort of see it and catch on. And what I realized was that after, 3 years of drinking the Kool-Aid and trying to feed the Kool-Aid to other people, there were other people that were now feeding the Kool-Aid.
Now serving it.
And that was the most thrilling experience. They were talking about our core values.
Man.
They were talking about our customer experience. They were bringing things to the table that I hadn't even thought of. And that's cool from a business experience. But what it represented to me was a transformation of leadership in these people. And that's tremendously rewarding. And people walked away from the retreat realizing that this is a different kind of company. And our vision of helping people become and achieve more than they thought possible is what drives me. And it is incredibly thrilling. So what's been my journey as an entrepreneur? Yes, it's about entrepreneurial freedom. I believe in that. Yes, it's about personal transformation. But now I'm getting so much joy out of seeing other people grow and become. And I believe that's what God has called me to do, and using my gifts to help other people maximize their gifts.
Man, I'm just basking in that. That was a beautiful reflection. Thank you. And if you believe it long enough, it becomes true.
Yeah.
That's a big part of my experience in business. I've heard somebody call it holding the pose. If you can hold it long enough to get past using it as a tactic, to try and get people to buy into the vision so they do these things, you can make money. If you can just really get to that point of what you articulated, of really caring and wanting to help people and having that intention felt and then flow from them into others, that's what I've experienced can get someone to the point, and has gotten to me to the point where I think I just might do this for free.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's so much bigger than the money. And I couldn't agree more with that reflection, man, because when it's just about the money and it doesn't happen in the time and in the way that you expected, you feel like a loser and a failure. And that's really, really heavy. And to free yourself from that and just to say, hey, this is, for many of us, for myself, and I believe for you too, this is a calling. There's some real freedom in that.
100%. And I want to take this opportunity to thank you for being that instrument in a lot of people's lives. And you were certainly that in my life. I remember one of the first times we spoke at some convention, it wasn't in this industry, you took an opportunity to ask me some questions, and you followed up with some books. And that was sort of the starting point. And I think it was like 5 or 6 or 7 or maybe 8 years later before we finally went into business together. But you've been that source of vision and maybe a little bit of making me unsettled with the status quo that I needed. So thank you for being that vehicle in my life.
Man, it's a pleasure and a joy. And thank you for taking all that and passing it on to other people. So the cycle just continues. That's
right.
Part of the beauty of doing this whole thing. Well, brother, I appreciate everything you're up to. You know that eyes are on you to eventually expand and maybe go back and take another crack at
We're working on it.
Take another crack at either the NARPM accounting standards. There's demand in the market for more data, more benchmarks. How long ago was that the NAS came out?
NAS came out in 2019.
2019. Yeah. There's so much shift in the market, trends. We talk about these things. That's exciting. It fuels podcasts. But at the same time, I'm going to put the bat signal out there in the air and say, I'm excited to, at some point here in the mid near future, be able to get back in the trenches with you and do some of that work, because it's incredibly valuable. And you were the only guy that I felt like could have been in that room with me when we had that conversation. And the conversation was something like, hey, Danny, we could do this thing. It'd be really cool. Like, that's my typical wind up, and 9 out of 10 times that fails. Every once in a while though, you have somebody that's like, yeah, we should do that. Don't know how, don't know when, not sure on the details, but let's do it. That's part of the joy I've experienced with you, is being willing to take the leap and play ball with the partner, man. That's what a great
100%.
partnership looks like, you know? You throw, they catch, and back and forth. So thanks for being a great partner.
It's coming. It's in progress. So,
all right, my man. Well, until next time, leave it there.
Thanks so much.